Hello students, I'm Dr. Himanshu Kanpal, Assistant Professor English, Government MS College for Women, Bikaner. Today I'm going to discuss literary term heroic couplet. What is a heroic couplet? A stanza consisting of two rhyming lines in iambic pentameter, especially one forming a rhetorical unit and written in an elevated style. Rhetorical means speech or writing that which is intended to influence people. Elevated means formal and dignified. So, a heroic couplet is a group of two lines rhyming at the end, both the lines being iambic pentameters. For example, know then thyself, presume not God to scan, the proper study of mankind is man. Both the lines together constitute a heroic couplet, as either of them is an iambic pentameter and they rhyme at the end. A heroic couplet is a pair of rhyming lines that is present in a heroic poem or that relays themes of heroism within a larger poem. Heroic couplets generally consist of two lines written in iambic pentameter. What is iambic pentameter? A pentameter is a line consisting of 5 feet. Pentameter, a line consisting of 5 feet. And if every one of these 5 feet is an iamb or iambic foot, the line is an iambic pentameter. An iambic foot consists of 2 syllables. Iambic means foot consists of 2 syllables, the first of which is unstressed and the second stress. Hence the term iambic pentameter. Heroic couplets generally consist of 2 lines written in iambic pentameter, though some poets choose to vary the meter, perhaps using blank verse or incorporating enjambment between the first line and the second line. In general, heroic couplets follow a simple AA end rhyme scheme and it is written in iambic pentameter. Iambic means pattern of unstressed followed by stressed one. Pentameter means 5 feet containing 10 syllables. The origin of the form in English poetry is unknown. It is said that heroic couplet was first used by Chaucer, who adapted it perhaps from Old French verse. Geoffrey Chaucer in The Legend of Good Women and the Canterbury Tales in the 14th century was the first to make extensive use of it. Some of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales as also the prologue are in couplets. By the end of the 16th century, Edmund Spenser, Christopher Marlowe and William Shakespeare made various uses of the heroic couplet. Spenser has written Mother Hubbard's Tale is a satiric narrative in heroic couplets. Michael Drayton's work, England's Heroical Epistles, we find the use of the couplet. And the lines of every sonnet by Shakespeare constitute a heroic couplet. So, the heroic couplet became the principal meter used in drama about the mid-17th century and the form was perfected by John Dryden and Alexander Pope in the late 17th and early 18th centuries. So, a heroic couplet is a specific type of couplet that discusses heroic themes. Always remember that heroic in the word heroic in heroic couplet means that discusses heroic themes and that usually uses iambic pentameter. What is the difference between a heroic couplet and an ordinary couplet? On the other hand, is simply 2 successive lines of poetry, often 2 lines that rhyme and that employ the same meter. The rhyming couplet is one of the simplest examples of poetic form, a pair of lines with end rhymes. It is a pair of lines with end rhymes. Rhyming couplets can be found everywhere, from the lyrical English poetry of Shakespeare to simple school nursery rhymes, though they employ the same meter. Okay, is the Pair of lines with end rhymes written in iambic pentameter. A heroic couplet is a form of couplet often found within epic or narrative poetry. What is an epic poetry? This is the actual difference between the ordinary couplets and the heroic couplet. They are found within epic or narrative poetry. Epic poetry is a form which focuses on long narratives that used to tell stories of exceptional people, heroic people, both real and fictional. Narrative poetry is again longer form of poetry that tells an entire story, which is beginning, middle and end. It contains the elements such as story, which include character, plot, conflict and resolution. So, a couplet refers to two lines of equal length that rhyme and that together form a complete thought. A heroic couplet is a couplet written in iambic pentameter so that in each line an unstressed syllable is followed by a stressed syllable for a total of 10 syllables per line, hence the term pentameter. The final two lines of Shakespeare's sonnets are heroic couplets that often summarize the poem as a whole. Shakespeare also uses heroic couplets at the end of scenes such as when Juliet says goodbye to Romeo at the end of Act 2, Scene 2, good night, parting is such sweet sorrow that I shall say good night till it be morrow. As a writer, John Dryden, who belongs to Restoration Age, was known for multiple stylistic feats such as perfecting the heroic couplet as a poet. Dryden used it with great power in both plays and poems, such as in his famous and immortal work, that is Absalom and Achitophel. He was the supreme master of the closed couplet and used the heroic couplet with great metrical skill, variation of speed, delicacy of touch, and made his couplets quite memorable. We can say that Dryden adopted the heroic couplet, but he improved upon his predecessor's verse. While he retained all the couplet's steadiness and force, he gave it an additional vigor. We can say he gave it an additional vigor, elegance and noble rhythm and beauty. We can take an example from Dryden's poem, One Happy Movement. Dryden has the ability to create 2-metered lines that can stand alone, since every couplet illustrates a complete thought. This is the speciality of John Dryden, that his every couplet illustrates a complete thought. One tender sigh of hers to see me languish will more than pay the price of my past anguish. Alexander Pope, one of the great neoclassical writers, perfected the rhyming couplet from his idol John Dryden and turned it to satiric and philosophical purposes. He used it in all his significant poems such as The Rape of the Lock, The Dunciad, Essay on Men, and on Essay on Criticism. The heroic couplet has its own parody, the mock heroic, most commonly associated with Pope. As I've already told you that he perfected the rhymed couplet and he used that couplet for satirical and philosophical purposes. So he used it in the poem Rape of the Lock, which is a mock heroic poem. The heroic couplet has its own parody, the mock heroic, most commonly associated with Pope. Pope's best known poems, The Rape of the Lock is a mock heroic poem. Pope mocks the heroic poem in two ways: by elevating a trivial moment into a kind of grand tale, Actually, I have told you that what is a heroic poem, which is written in a elevated and dignified style, and it is written about the exceptional feats of a hero. But here, what Pope has chosen, he has chosen a trivial moment, and he has elevated that trivial moment into a kind of a grand tale. What was the moment? It was what was the story of Rape of the Lock. In it, a certain Lord Peter cut off a lock of hair from the head of Miss Arabella Fermor. And instead of great passions and great fights between heroes in which immortals take parts, we have the theme in the Rape of the Lock as a petty amorous quarrel between the ladies and gents of the 18th century. Okay. The poem combines with its humorous, epic treatment of the trivial theme, a delicate fancy, and a good deal of satire on the weaknesses of the fair sex and on society manners in general. This is how Alexander Pope used the couplet in his mock heroic poem. Pope is also famous for another thing, that he has made certain variations, he has certain changes. Pope is also famous for writing Alexandrines. What is an Alexandrine? A rhyming couplet in which the first line is in iambic pentameter. Remember that first line is an iambic pentameter, and the second line is an Alexandrine. That is, second line is an iambic hexameter. Hexameter means a line of 12 syllables. So what is an Alexandrine? Alexandrine is a single line of poetry which counts a total of 12 syllables. 6 feet, 12 syllables. From the age of John Dryden through that of Samuel Johnson, the heroic couplet was the predominant English measure for all the poetic kinds in the neoclassic period. The poets wrote in closed couplets, that is John Dryden and Alexander Pope, in which the end of each couplet tends to coincide with the and either of a sentence or of a self-sufficient unit of syntax. Hence, they are self-sufficient unit. They contain a complete thought. Hence, they are called as closed couplet. Remember that they often used an end stopped first line. How? That is, made the end of the line coincide with a pause in the syntax. And stopped first line, there is a pause in the syntax, and also broke many single lines into subunits by balancing the line around a strong caesure or medial pause in the syntax. Caesure. What is caesure? That is a break between words within a metrical foot. In simple words, we can say it is a pause near the middle of line. So, each of the two lines of heroic couplet, there are generally two pauses or stops, one at the end, that is end stop, and other somewhere in the middle, that is called as caesure. Usually after the fourth or sixth syllable, it is very often indicated by a punctuation mark such as comma or semicolon. The sustained employment of the closed heroic couplet meant that two lines had to serve something of the function of a stanza. These closed neoclassic couplets contrasted with the open pentameter couplets from John Keats' Endymion. In the latter, the pattern of stresses, we are talking about Keats' Endymion, he made certain variations in it. In the latter, the pattern of stresses varies often from the iambic norm. The syntax is unsymmetrical. If we compare the open pentameter couplets to the closed neoclassic couplets, it often varies often from the iambic norm. The syntax is unsymmetrical and the couplets run on freely. The sense may be allowed to flow from one couplet to the next. And this overflowing of the sense from one couplet to the next is called enjambment. So, Closed neoclassic couplets, we can say they were self-contained units. But in open couplets, the sense may be allowed to flow from one couplet to the next. In other words, the couplet may not be a closed one having a strong pause at the end. This overflowing of the sense from one couplet to next is called enjambment. Writers of the heroic couplet, including Dryden and Pope, allowed themselves considerable liberty for enjambment. Keats uses the couplets at the beginning of Endymion. We can have a look. We can have a great example of open pentameter couplets from Keats' Endymion. A thing of a beauty is a joy forever. Its loveliness increases. It will never pass into nothingness, but still keep a bower quiet for us and sleep full of sweet dreams and health and quiet breathing. This is kind of some variation in the poetry. So, in both its original and parodic forms, the heroic couplet is an important part of Western poetry's evolution. With its driving rhythm, tight rhyme, and syntactical independence, it mirrors the subject matter it portrays: tales of adventure, war, magic, true love, and even a stolen lock of hair, as in the Rape of the Lock. Because of its structure and its history and tradition, the heroic couplet is usually quite recognizable, allowing us to bring additional context to the poems we read. So here we are going to sum up. Heroic couplets make a self-contained unit. They are written in iambic pentameter lines. The rhyme is limited to the ending syllables, but there are some variation in it. The heroic couplet may not always form a self-contained unit, as we have seen in the Keats Endymion. Sometimes the two lines of a heroic couplet may not be the exact pentameters, as we have seen in the Alexandrines, Pope's example of an Alexandrine. Sometimes the caesura may not come at all, which marks for the speed. One more thing is there here, that sometimes the rhyming may not be limited to the ending syllables. It may be extended to two ending syllables of each line. Two ending syllables such as rhyme is called as double rhyme or feminine rhyme. And sometimes the heroic couplet may give place to a triplet also. So we are going to end it here. With Dryden and Pope, we come to the real masters of the heroic couplet. They made the couplet regular and correct at the same time, very flexible and polished medium of poetic expression. But the vogue of couplet declined after Dr. Johnson. After him, as a romanticism spread in the air and poets started gradually turning away from the conventions of the neoclassical school of Dryden and Pope. However, off and on, there did come poems in heroic couplet. By its very nature, the heroic couplets makes the fittest medium for the certain kinds of poetry. Its rapidity, balance, and epigrammatic flavor render it suitable particularly for satiric and narrative poetry. This is all about heroic couplet. I hope you liked the video. Share, like, and subscribe. Thank you.